Dinosaurs are scary, but they weren't the first scary animals to walk the earth. In fact, when the dinosaurs finally did arrive on our planet, they were actually kind of small fry compared to some of the super predators that had been ruling the land before them. Some of these monsters were so monstrous that if one were to show up in Jurassic Park, even the T-Rex would be sent packing. And today, we're taking a look at the scariest predators that roamed the earth before dinosaurs even existed. First, let's get an idea of just how old we're going. The Triassic period began around 250 million years ago and lasted until about 201 million years ago. This means that any critter we talk about today predated not only all dinosaurs, but also mammals and even the first true reptiles. So whatever these critters are, they will be truly ancient. As for what life was like back then, well, let's put it this way, there were definitely no Starbucks. Continents were still joined together in a single landmass called Pangaea with an enormous superocean called Panthalassa surrounding it. The only land animals back then were a mix of early relatives of mammals called synapsids and a variety of different reptiles. Life wasn't so bad if you were a synapsid because many of them were huge and in charge. But unfortunately, there was one massive problem. Synapsids didn't last very long, which is a shame because they gave rise to the cutest little monster featured in this video, the Dimetrodon. The Dimetrodon lived during the early Triassic period. And though it's considered a synapsid, it's actually more closely related to the mammal-like reptiles than it is to actual mammals. That's right. The Dimetrodon was technically a reptile, but it looked nothing like your typical lizard or snake. It was actually kind of goofy looking with its sail back and short legs. But don't be fooled by its appearance because the Dimetrodon was a vicious predator that would terrify any animal foolish enough to cross its path. For starters, the Dimetrodon grew to be absolutely gigantic. And like most dime-sized fossils that are usually only a few feet long, the Dimetrodon could grow up to 14 feet long and weigh over a ton. That's longer than a Tyrannosaurus rex and almost twice as heavy as the heaviest modern crocodile. With a body like that, the Dimetrodon had room for a set of enormous jaws filled with big, sharp teeth that it used to chomp through flesh with ease. And unlike modern crocodiles, the Dimetrodon was fully terrestrial. While crocodiles still spend a lot of time on land, they need to return to water frequently to stay moist and keep their skin from drying out. The Dimetrodon's skin, however, was covered in tiny scales that helped it conserve water. So it could hunt far from the nearest river or ocean without drying out. It is believed that Dimetrodon's huge size and flexible limbs allowed it to go after bigger prey than other land animals. And there was no shortage of new meaty targets since the Triassic saw the sudden emergence of the first large reptiles. But the Dimetrodon couldn't stick around to feast on them for long. At the end of the Triassic period, there was a mass extinction event that killed off nearly all life on Earth, including the Dimetrodon. But while the Dimetrodon was a mammal-like reptile, the next animal we'll discuss is a true reptile that was every bit as scary, the Gorgonopsids. Okay, technically, Gorgonopsids weren't a single species, but rather a group of around 60 different types of terrifying reptiles. They were some of the largest and most ferocious carnivores in the Triassic, and they stuck around for a long time, meaning they had plenty of opportunities to strike terror into the hearts of their prey. Like the Dimetrodon, Gorgonopsians were very mammal-like reptiles, although some sources refer to them as proto-wombats because of their squat, sturdy build. But despite their somewhat cute appearance, Gorgonopsians were savage killers. Some species, like the saber-toothed Gorgonopsids, had long, narrow snouts and enormous blades for teeth that could easily slice through flesh. Others, like the robust Megalodon, had shorter, broader heads with smaller, less noticeable teeth. These guys likely fed primarily on insects and other small prey. But whichever species of Gorgonopsian you encounter, none of them were anything to mess with. For starters, they were once again absolutely gigantic, growing between 8 and 15 feet long and weighing up to 1,000 pounds. That's about the same size as a polar bear, which already eats just about anything it wants. But Gorgonopsians weren't just big. They were also built to run, move quickly, and deliver powerful bites. Plus, They were nocturnal hunters, which meant their prey didn't even have a chance to escape during daylight hours. But while Gorgonopsids were extremely successful predators, their reign of terror came to an end during the aforementioned mass extinction at the end of the Triassic period. So no matter how brutal things get in the Age of Dinosaurs, at least they never had to face off against a Gorgonopsid. But unfortunately, the mass extinction didn't wipe out all monsters. In fact, it might have made things worse. You see, the mass extinction cleared out a lot of competition for a diverse group of animals called archosaurs, which eventually led to the rise of the dinosaurs. But before the dinosaurs took over, another type of archosaur became the dominant land animal, the phytosaurs. And phytosaurs were basically just giant crocodiles. Oh wait, they actually were crocodiles. See, phytosaurs are part of a diverse group of crocodilians known as the crocodilia, which obviously includes modern crocodiles, alligators, caimans, and gharials. But despite the fact that phytosaurs were crocodiles, they don't seem to get along with their scaly cousins today. Crocodilians are generally reluctant to interbreed with each other, even when given the opportunity. So studying their evolutionary history can be difficult because there aren't always clear genetic links. But in the case of phytosaurs, scientists were able to determine that they were indeed crocodiles. And boy, were they scary. One of the biggest and most famous phytosaurs was the aptly named Prehistoric, which means very fierce crocodile. And fierce is an absolute understatement. Despite being called a crocodile, Prehistoric actually kind of resembled a mixture between a crocodile and a whale. It had a long, narrow snout like a crocodile, but its jaws were much deeper and its overall body shape was more like a fish or a dolphin. This might have been an adaptation to allow it to swim more easily in the giant sea that surrounded Pangaea. And it likely hunted fish, but it probably didn't hang out in the water all the time because it had legs. Well, technically, it had tiny little legs, but it had legs nonetheless. And like the Dimetrodon, these legs allowed the Prehistoric to roam far from any water source. Fossils have been found with bite marks from other phytosaurs, meaning that even other crocodiles feared this thing. And it's thought that these bite marks were territorial, which means the Prehistoric was yet another huge animal. After all, why would a crocodile need to bite another crocodile if it wasn't trying to defend its own dinner? Unfortunately, like everything else so far, the Prehistoric eventually died out, although it wasn't around to see the rise of the dinosaurs. The last of the phytosaurs died out towards the end of the Triassic period, leaving our planet once again devoid of massive monsters. And this would likely continue to be the case until the end of the Cretaceous period, except it wouldn't. See, the real reason dinosaurs are so popular today is because they were just the tip of the iceberg. The late Cretaceous was home to a bizarre assortment of dinosaurs, some of which were so weird they wouldn't even be believable if they showed up today. Thanks for watching. Do you think you'd survive a fight against a Gorgonopsid? Let me know in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.